Welcome to Principal Center Radio, helping you build capacity for instructional leadership. Here's your host, Director of the Principal Center, Dr. Justin Bader.
Welcome, everyone, to Principal Center Radio. I'm your host, Justin Bader, and I'm honored to welcome to the program Jamie Sears. Jamie is a former third grade teacher and is currently the CEO of Not So Wimpy Teacher, an education blog that spans Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, email, and podcasts. With 500,000 teachers and administrators in her tribe, Jamie has spent years designing tools and inventing strategies that restore the joys of teaching. And she's the author of the new book, How to Love Teaching Again. I'm going to say that a little bit better. How to Love Teaching Again. Work smarter, beat burnout, and watch your students thrive.
And now, our feature presentation.
Jamie, welcome to Principal Center Radio.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, I'm excited to talk about the book because it's about a hypothetical thing that never happens, which is teacher burnout, right?
Never, ever happens.
Never happens. Why is this happening so much? Why is there a need for a book like How to Love Teaching Again?
Yeah, I always wanted to be an author, but I have to tell you that it is a little bit sad that there is a need for a book like this. I would love if our state of education meant that there wasn't a need to write a book about teacher burnout and how to love your job. But there is. And why is there burnout? So many reasons, but one that I've come to really believe is a big catalyst is that teachers have defined their success on student test scores, on student achievement, and they're also just watching what every other teacher is doing. Social media has changed teaching, and they see all of these things other teachers are doing to help their students reach achievement, that A, that test score they're looking for. And so they're constantly trying to do more. How can I do more? How can I help my students more? In fact, their burnout comes from truly a love for their students.
And I think as leaders, we have historically promoted that idea of dedication and of doing everything you can, whatever it takes, no excuses, kind of leave it all on the field approach to teaching. And certainly, we want to do our best. We want everyone to do what they can for students, but we also don't want people to burn out and quit mid-year and not come back and, all the things that we're seeing happen kind of on an unprecedented scale now. What role do you think, not to blame anybody, but what role or what messages do you think leaders have historically sent that has contributed to that burnout problem?
Well, I think that teachers feel, whether it's accurate or not, feel from administrators or maybe even from society as a whole that they should be doing more. There's all these studies like test scores are going down. We're the lowest state in the nation. All of these things come out, and it sort of makes teachers feel to blame. And I mean, your idea of like we're telling teachers work harder, do it for the team. And we've all been in jobs like that where your manager's telling you do more. But I think for teachers, when their administrator recognizes that they're going to give their all at school and then leave to recuperate so that they can come back and give their all tomorrow, when an administrator understands the value of balance, teachers feel safer in their job. If they know that their administrator understands that they can only work at their top level if they have the rest.
So I think many of our best loved colleagues, the colleagues we respect the most, the people who just do the most amazing things with their students, the people who work the hardest, many of our colleagues seem to not really have any upper limit on what they would give. And maybe we've seen that as a good thing. What do you see as maybe some of the downsides of that kind of infinite willingness to do whatever it takes? And what are people starting to realize now that might not have thought of before?
Yeah, absolutely. A teacher across the hall from me, Sherry, I write about her in my book. And to me, she was the ultimate teacher because she said yes to everything. She was at every school function. She was creating the most amazing lessons. She did music appreciation in her elementary school classroom. Who has time for that? Sherry. And so on the outside, as a brand new teacher, I thought, she is who I want to emulate. I want to be Sherry. And it got to the point where I was literally sitting in the principal's office in tears because I couldn't reach her standards. And I remember the principal saying to me, stop trying to be Sherry. Nobody else can be Sherry. And it was a really good message for me about just being me. And I also got to know Sherry better and realized that what she was doing was not sustainable either. Her physical health was in jeopardy. And so I wanted to be the greatest teacher I could possibly be, but I also needed to think about what was sustainable. So maybe there is a season of a teacher's life where they can be that volunteer at the activities that are at night after their contracted hours, but there's also going to be seasons where they have to set the boundary and say, no, right now that doesn't fit into my life. And I think that it's hard for a teacher to say no. It truly is, because like everyone says, they do it for the kids, and they truly do it for the kids, sometimes to the extent that they fail to see how it affects their own health and well-being.
Well, and the book is called How to Love Teaching Again. What happens to that love when people don't have those boundaries in place and are just working excessive hours, building up their stress to an unhealthy level?
Yeah, I see this in my community all the time. A teacher comes in and says, I love teaching, but I'm starting to question whether I can do this anymore. And generally speaking, teachers usually have wanted to be a teacher since they were a small child. We hear the story over and over again. When I was in first grade, I loved my teacher so much, I wanted to be a teacher. Or my mom, my grandma was a teacher. I've wanted to be a teacher my whole life. And then they get into this position and they realize that it's a lot more than they thought it was going to be. And all of that pressure, it just gets so heavy for them. And so they're battling. This has been my life's dream, but every day is getting a little bit harder. And mostly it's because they haven't set some boundaries, like some healthy boundaries around what is being a good teacher, defining that for themselves, and not the definition from their administrator or from society or from parents, students, but what does it mean to them to be a good teacher? I talk a lot about that with my audience, and they realize that they've always gone with whatever the school said it meant. If the school's mission this year is to become accredited and this or that, can be labeled A plus, whatever it is, that becomes their identity. I'll be a good teacher if I do X, Y, and Z. And when we talk about, well, what do you want to be as a teacher? Then it starts to dig into the whole reason they became a teacher in the first place. That's where that joy is. It's still there. It's just gotten a little bit heavy and they can't find it anymore. So when we dig into like, what does it mean to be a good teacher? Most of them say things like, to engage my students every day, to teach them to love learning. And I'm like, oh, teach them to love learning. That's something every day you can ask. What did I do today to help at least one of my students fall in love with learning? Teachers can answer that question every single day. And then they're like, whoa, this is amazing what I'm doing. When they feel that kind of success, they're motivated to do it again tomorrow and the next day. But when they come home and they're like, I didn't get the to-do list done, the testing wasn't what I thought it was going to be, I have so much curriculum to read, they fail to see all the wins. That's when it's hard to find that love that's like deep, deep down inside.
Now, I think probably all of us at some point in our career, and maybe most of us for most of our career, have felt like if the job is going to be done well, it is going to be somewhat unsustainable. There is definitely this martyr ideal that if you are going to do a good job, you're going to have to put in really excessive hours. And there's almost been kind of a split in perspective. You have the kind of cynical perspective that says, it doesn't matter anyway, the district's going to mess things up, so I'm just going to put in my time and, kind of just get by with what I can get by with. And on the other side, you have people who say, well, I know I'm not in a perfect system, but I am going to do whatever I can to help my students succeed. And I think there's always been that split, right? There have always been different levels of kind of commitment and purpose and engagement within our ranks. But I feel like the conversation is starting to shift where we're all now starting to see the importance of healthy boundaries and just the sheer impossibility of holding ourselves to perpetually infinite standards. So let's talk about boundaries. What are boundaries? What are some examples of boundaries, and how can people give themselves permission to set boundaries without feeling guilty?
Yeah, that is it. How can we set boundaries and not feel guilty? When I hear the word boundary, I still sort of have a negative reaction to it. Like the word sounds bad. Like if someone says they're going to set boundaries, you almost have this immediate thought of like, "Ooh, that doesn't sound good." And I realized for a long time the reason boundaries sound so bad to me is because other people were setting boundaries that I had to live with, but I didn't have my own. So for me, boundaries were all of the ways I had to fit into every other role or every other person's life, but I didn't have my own boundaries. And so maybe the parents in my classroom had boundaries, but I didn't. Or even my administrator might have some boundaries, but I didn't. And so when I got up the nerve to have a few boundaries, I realized, well, this is really powerful because a boundary is your ability to say no. It gives you permission to say no. And I think no matter what career you're in, you should always have permission to say no. And we always want, I run a team and I'm a boss and I want my team to get more done, more done, more done. But I also understand that if they burn out, if this isn't sustainable, then I have to rehire. That is so time consuming. That is so costly. I don't have to tell you that. And in this day and age, hard to find. It's hard to find. So, boundaries that I think can go a long way can be so simple. And when I suggest them to teachers, they're actually scared. But I suggested, what if you set a boundary that you don't answer your work email on the weekends? It seems pretty reasonable that you shouldn't have to answer your email on the weekend, but instantly teachers are like put up their armor like, "Oh my gosh, but what if something happens?" And I said, "Your principal has your phone number. If there was an emergency, couldn't they still get a hold of you?" And it's like, "Yeah." Here's the thing that happens to teachers. They get an email from a parent who's so upset over a grade. Instead of just saying, "You know what, I will help that parent understand that on Monday," it actually consumes their brain all weekend. I can't believe they're just now getting to me. I told them that we were having this problem. I've sent home review packets. I've called them. I've sent notes and emails. And now they're worried. And instead of relaxing and enjoying their weekend so they can come back refreshed and ready to give their all from 8 to 4 or 7 to 4, whatever it might be, now they're coming back tired. They've spent the whole weekend working in their brain what they're going to say to this parent, what they're going to do differently. And now they're tired. So if you start Monday tired, man, by Friday, you're barely crawling. So that simple boundary, put it out of office. It doesn't have to be rude. I tell them, like, we get out of office messages all the time. If I call a doctor's office at 6 o'clock at night, I don't expect anyone to answer. They have, an out of office message that tells me that they'll be back in the morning. And I respect that. And it's normal. Even Chick-fil-A isn't open on Sundays. It's kind of irritating if you want chicken on Sunday. However, they've set that boundary and said, we're not open on Sunday. So you learn to respect it. And so I feel like once teachers communicate something simple like, this is my boundary, and then we go a little further, because that's scary. But if I can get them to set an out of office on their email for the weekend, that makes a huge difference. But then I actually challenge them to set work hours. I don't know why this sounds so crazy in the education space, because in other workforces, you would have work hours. Like, I go to work at this time and this is when I come home about. But teachers, it's like, I go to work and I'll come home when I'm done. And the reality is they've created this huge long to-do list that never could be done in the amount of time that they have, and struggle to prioritize that. So they're working so incredibly late. And the idea that I'm asking them to set work hours, and I don't tell them like it has to be 40 hours. It should be the number of hours that feels good to you beyond your contracted time. And that's a really tough one for teachers to even say, like, I work from 7 to 4. Like, they have a real difficult time just saying that. But once teachers do set work hours and become more in control of saying, I can't do that because it's actually after my work hours, but could we do it tomorrow at 3:30 instead? That type of boundary is not rude. It's actually just communicating something. And most people, once it's communicated, are like, oh, okay, no problem. But most teachers don't believe that will be true until they give it a whirl. And so I highly, highly encourage teachers to set those work hours and communicate them with others.
Yeah. And that will be perceived as a professional move. Like you said, if you call the doctor at night, if it's not a urgent care clinic, if it's not an emergency room, you're going to get voicemail. You're going to get an answering service, not the doctor, because the doctor's at home and is not going to see you at their house at night. But we don't have that same, I think, professional identity across the board, that we're professionals, and when we are at work we do work, and when we are at home, I will see you tomorrow, kind of thing. And I think sometimes we forget that when people are available 24 hours, like in the emergency room, it's because they have completely different staff who come in to work while the other people are sleeping. But that's not the case. It's just us. We're just a one shift operation in K-12 schools for the most part.
Yeah. And if you keep answering your emails all weekend, guess what? They'll keep sending more too. And I'm sure you can relate to that. I'm sure all administrators can relate to that, because I've emailed my principal on the weekend and gotten a response. And I thought, all right, I'm allowed to email on the weekend now. And so it's the same for teachers. As long as you keep responding to parents over the weekend, it gives permission for them to continue to send more emails and expect your response immediately.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like we're training other people to not respect our boundaries if we, and I love hearing when people, come up with tricks like, hey, maybe I want to answer email on Saturday. Maybe that just works for me this week. Well, I'm going to schedule all my replies so they don't go out until Monday morning, not only to respect other people's, boundaries and to not give them work on the weekend, but also so they don't reply. Give me work to do in the meantime. So you have a lot of practical tips in the book. What are some of the big categories of those tips to help people work smarter, save time, not be so overwhelmed with just the workload of the job?
Yeah, I do think there needs to be big reform in the world of education. And I think teachers need me to continue to use my voice, my platform, my vote to work out those bigger problems with funding and testing and things. But in the meantime, we're losing teachers really fast. So my thought was to write this book to give them some practical strategies to make tomorrow easier. And I thought if we make tomorrow easier, then maybe we can work on the next day just with these practical strategies. I don't want to put it all on their laps. Like, it's your job to fix education, teachers, because it's not what I believe. But I also know that they're wanting to fight it out. They're hoping they can make it, right? So I want to make it them. I want to make their life just a tad easier. So I think one of the most important strategies that I teach in the book is how to plan their plan time. I find that teachers are amazing planners. It's what they spend a lot of time doing. They plan out every minute of the instructional day. Ask a teacher what they're doing at 9:24 next Thursday, and they can tell you exactly what they'll be doing, maybe even the page number, because they plan every minute. What they don't plan is their time. They plan the students' time, but not their time. So when I say plan time, I'll get teachers who are all like get defensive, like, I don't even have a plan period. And that may be true. So plan time for them might mean before school, after school, whenever they choose to do their lesson planning, their grading, responding to email, that sort of thing. I know I would, take my kids out, get them in their cars to go home, come back to my classroom, and I would look at this massive to-do list. And one of two things would happen. I would either look at it and go, oh my gosh, it's so big, I'm never going to get any of it done, and therefore not even attempt it, because it's scary to the brain to see something that it knows it can't be successful with. That's not safe. And your brain tries to keep you safe. So it's like, I can't do any of this. So you do none of it. Or maybe I do choose to work on that list, but you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick the easiest things off the list rather than prioritizing them. I'm going to pick the easiest because I'm tired. I'm going to pick the easiest because it's overwhelming. So I really found that I would leave and feel like I did nothing today. I was so unproductive. I'm going to have to come early tomorrow. I'm going to be better tomorrow. And this was just an ongoing trend until I took control and started planning that time out as if they were meetings with myself. And so let's say I'm going to be at school from 3 until 4:30 after school. I am going to take my list and I'm going to prioritize by the must-dos. Must-dos are like meetings. If I have an IEP meeting, I must do that. I can't put it off for tomorrow. It's going to go on the calendar for that specific time, and I'm going to show up for it, right? After I put those real must-dos, now I have to think about the priorities. Well, preparing for that IEP meeting, probably going to have to put that on my calendar. Maybe there's some grading I need to do. But instead of writing on my calendar, work on grading, work on getting ready for the IEP, I am going to break it down into micro tasks that can be finished. So it's not what I'm going to work on, it's what I'm going to complete, to finish. So maybe 3 to 3:30. Maybe I was going to work on graded math tests, but I'm not going to be able to grade all the math tests in 30 minutes. So at the end of 30 minutes, I'm actually going to feel defeated. I didn't do it. Well, I already know I can't grade them all in 30 minutes. So instead, I'm going to write grade 10 math tests. Now, when 10 math tests are graded, my head can actually celebrate. I did it. I did exactly what I said I was going to do. I've made a meeting with myself from 3 to 3:30 to grade 10 math tests. When you tell your head that's what it has to do and it feels doable, then you get right to work, right? That's when you stop scrolling social or going to the classroom next door to vent about your day, because now you have a meeting with yourself and it feels manageable. And then from 3:30 to 4, maybe I'm responding to email, and I've created time slots to do specific things so that I don't get distracted and so that the most important things get completed. The rest of the things on that list will get delayed or deleted because they weren't a priority. And learning to plan your plan time will make it so that you still feel incredibly productive without having to work 60 hours per week. You can get more done in less time because teachers don't want to do less, but they sure would like to regain some of that time.
And there are so many opportunities like that to get done what we can and not feel defeated when we don't finish it within the time that's available. I know the book is just loaded with strategies like that. But I want to draw on that fact to issue a caution to school leaders. We've seen a lot of reaction lately to this idea that, well, leaders, district leaders, principals, administrators of all types should just encourage teachers to set boundaries by giving them a book like this. And I'm assuming you didn't write the book so that people could hit each other with it or hit each other upside the head and say, here's how you can do the impossible things that I'm demanding that you do constantly. So what is your hope for what leaders will do with this book, rather than just say, figure it out, make the unrealistic work that I'm giving you doable with these strategies? How do you hope leaders will use this book?
Well, if all you do is hand over the book, it's going to be perceived as you just asking them to find a way to do more for you. But when you are the administrator who sits down with your teachers and lets them know how much you care about their well-being, when you give books like this, it's perceived as thoughtful. So I had an administrator sit down with me once because she could tell I was overwhelmed, and she talked to me about my family and my life. And I realized in that moment she cared about me. It's just like teachers who are having these conversations with their students, developing relationships. When you have that relationship with a teacher, then when you bring a book like this, you're like, this popped up and it really made me think of you, because I know that you want to go home earlier, get your work done sooner. I know that you have a lot going on in your family life right now. I think when you have a relationship, you can recommend books. If you just go to them with the whole staff and you're like, everyone needs to read this book and start getting more done, that will never go over well with your teaching staff.
It's just one more thing to do, right? One more task. Read another book.
Exactly.
Well, and I would love to see administrators actually read the book themselves and highlight it and, figure out, okay, what is this person that I'm working, this person is too overwhelmed to read a book right now, but I can share with them this strategy or this system because I see them working way harder than they need to on something that there is a better solution to.
Absolutely. And there's so many teacher stories within the book, and some of them are heartbreaking. But I guess why they're heartbreaking is because you realize they're true. There's stories of teachers who said they worked so late that they had to climb out the fire escape because they didn't want to set off the school alarm. And I mean, marriages that are in trouble because of the work hours. And I think it's important to know what the teachers are feeling and thinking within your district so that you can be more empathetic to what's happening in their own lives.
Well, Jamie, one thing that strikes me as difficult about being a teacher is that everyone is expected to be a teacher on day one. And we kind of hold ourselves to the standard of the people we look up to who may have 20 years of experience ahead of us. And I really remember that learning curve in the first couple of years of teaching seeming just vertical, that how can I get up to that level that I want myself to be at? and there's no kind of like junior teacher. You can't be like a junior teacher and kind of ease into the responsibilities. It's like you get 100% of the responsibilities on day one. So what do you think about that as kind of a developmental issue for new teachers? And what's some of your advice that you would give to someone who's just feeling like they have so much to learn?
Wow. I feel like you just described my first year of teaching, because I was thrown into this classroom, and I actually student taught in 12th grade, and I got thrown into a third grade classroom. So I truly felt like I was just drowning. I actually wrote them up this big long syllabus and read it to them. So anyone who has experienced 8-year-olds, it's not a good move. I don't recommend it. It was not engaging. Students did not go home saying, wow, Mrs. Sears is going to be so much fun this year. But that's all I knew how to do, because that's what I learned with a 12th grade government student teaching experience. And so I was lost. And here's the thing, I felt like I was all by myself. I didn't want the other teachers to know that I was struggling, because that would they would think I wasn't a good teacher. I wanted them to think that I had it all together. So even though they were the people I probably should be asking help of, I was scared for them to find out how much help I really needed. And when I did finally ask for help, the things I needed to know, I walked in the day before school started and I asked the teacher, I said, what are you doing with your students tomorrow? And she's got all these activities because, she's been teaching forever and she's got all these things. And I'm like, that looks fun. And she said, well, you can make copies of them. And I said, question, where do I get copy paper? I didn't know where my mailbox was. And I felt so lost. I had a mentor teacher though, and it was everything to be able to have somebody who just stopped in to ask how I was doing, and somebody who truly knew what I was going through. So having a mentor teacher mattered. But also, I'm telling you, my administrator sat down with me numerous times to check in on me and to celebrate my successes. I feel teachers they often don't feel appreciated, whether it's from parents, students, administrators. There's a lack of appreciation from society for the work that teachers do. And when somebody took the time to celebrate successes that I didn't even see, because that's the thing, I couldn't see success because all I saw was what I wasn't doing. I wasn't teaching music appreciation. I wasn't getting the to-do list done. I had to make my own curriculum because I didn't know that I wasn't going to be given quality curriculum. I was floundering. But when the principal took the time to sit down and compliment me on multiple things she saw, it really sparked something inside of me. Like maybe I'm not doing it all wrong. I'm not there yet, but maybe I could be. And it's just so hard to be a first-year teacher. We have so many first-year teachers in our community, and going from the college experience to just being dropped in the classroom, it's scary. And just knowing that those new teachers are going to be a bit scared. And of course, the more we can help teachers to fall in love with teaching, the less we have to keep hiring new teachers. I'm not saying, not to hire a new teacher, but when we can keep our staff in place, that's even better for the school system.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, it's so much work, of course, to hire, so much work to support. And if we don't put enough into the support, then we get to do the hiring all over again and the support all over again. So yeah, definitely something we're coming to terms with as a profession. So the book is How to Love Teaching Again. Work smarter, beat burnout, and watch your students thrive. Jamie Sears, if people want to connect with you online and find more about your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Thank you. Yeah, they can find me at notsowimpyteacher.com on Facebook and Instagram, also under Not So Wimpy Teacher. And the book's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, anywhere where you buy your books.
Fabulous. Well, Jamie, thank you so much for joining me on Principal Center Radio. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to Principal Center Radio. For more great episodes, subscribe on our website at principalcenter.com/radio.